Welcome back, Bio30 Prep, for the last time. This is our last lecture for the course. We're going to finish talking about muscles or the muscular system with muscle physiology. In your textbook, it's pages 344 to 350. By the end of this lecture, you'll be able to identify and describe some of the disorders of the muscle system. You'll be able to compare the type of muscle type found in the human body and the function of each. You'll be able to describe the role exercise plays in maintaining a healthy muscular system, and you'll identify the role of the muscular system in maintaining homeostasis. Now, the nice thing about muscular disorders is there's almost none. They're prone to injury, so torn muscles, pulled muscles, that kind of thing, bruised muscles, and they can also atrophy, which is a reduction in muscle tissue from the lack of use, usually occurring after things like major surgery, casting, or paralysis. So those are the three major causes of atrophy. And what atrophy is simply a loss of muscle mass due to lack of use. If you don't use it, you lose it. And what that does is it causes weakness in the area where atrophy occurs. The smaller the muscle is, the less force it can use to pull on the rest of your body, and the less weight it can support when it moves. Here is a list of some muscular disorders. You should take a chance to read it through, and that's all I'm going to really say about that. We can talk about the benefits of exercise. Exercise results in hypertrophy, so atrophy is reduced muscles. Hypertrophy is an increase in muscle mass from muscle use. What happens is the fibers themselves increase in size, so we don't gain new cells when we exercise, but the muscle cells actually get bigger. They increase in terms of the amount of myosin and actin inside of them, so the muscle fibers actually get bigger as we exercise, because it increases the number of enzymes or proteins and the number of mitochondria inside each muscle cell. Mitochondria are responsible for cellular respiration. This is how we get our ATP, and we talked about that in the last lecture. We need ATP to get those myosin and actin strands moving, and cellular respiration is a very good way of getting ATP. That happens inside mitochondria. So if you exercise, your cells actually increase the number of mitochondria inside each muscle cell or muscle fiber. Muscles that are used often can work longer before lactate fermentation begins. And remember, lactate fermentation, after about 5 minutes of lactate fermentation, the pH gets too low and the muscles cramp. So muscle twitch is the word for, or the term for, a single contraction in a muscle. It lasts less than a second. Most muscle fibers are either all or none response, so either they're stimulated to contract and they contract completely, or they're not stimulated to contract at all. So the contraction of a whole muscle is a result of many muscle fibers or many muscle cells contracting in unison. There's 3 periods to a twitch. There's the latent phase, which is the period between the stimulus and the muscle contraction. You can think about it almost as reaction time. You think about moving a muscle, a message is sent from your brain to your muscle to contract, and then your muscle contracts. All that takes time, for some people more time than others, but that's the latent period. There's a contraction phase, which is the contraction of the muscle, and then the relaxation period, which is when the muscle relaxes, allowing it to stretch back out. If a fiber is exposed to multiple stimuli before complete relaxation, then something called summation occurs, leading to tetanus, which is not the same as a disease. It's a word for the maximum muscle contraction. This would be doing maybe reps with barbells. If you don't relax the muscles completely after each lift, you'll get this. Then the relaxation period doesn't happen, and this results in tetanus, maximum muscle contraction. After you can maintain tetanus for a certain length of time, after which the muscle tissue runs out of ATP and you end up in muscle fatigue. So you end up in a state where the force of contraction is going to weaken down to none. So there's two types of actual muscle twitch. They're classified based on the type of metabolic reaction used for the fiber. There's fast twitch fiber. So this is muscle fiber, muscle cells that specialize in twitching quickly. They're high in glycogen. Glycogen is a carbohydrate, source of energy. They're low in myoglobin because they're not going to rely on no cellular respiration. I shouldn't say no cellular respiration. What I should say, sorry. What we should say is that we're not going to be doing oxidative respiration. And what we mean by that is when we break sugar down using oxygen to get lots of ATP, that's great if we're exercising for a long period of time, or if we want muscles to last a long time or for a long duration. Fast twitch fiber doesn't need to be active for a long period of time. Think about your eye muscles. They twitch back and forth, but they don't have to maintain a constant twitching in any one direction. So they actually rely on lactate fermentation because lactate respiration is fast. It doesn't require mitochondria or any organelle for it to go through. The enzymes are all throughout the cytoplasm of the cell or the sarcoplasm of the muscle cell. So lactate fermentation is easy and it's quick. If you're developing muscle for sprinting or for weightlifting, you're going to be developing fast twitch fibers. The downfall of fast twitch fibers is they're easy to fatigue because they're low in mitochondria. Mitochondria do cellular respiration. They get energy quickly. Lactate fermentation, remember, the more lactate fermentation you do, the lower the pH gets in the muscle, and eventually it's going to cramp and not work properly. Slow twitch fiber is the opposite. It's going to be high in glycogen as well because we need energy, but it's also high in fat because fat stores even more energy, and this is muscle that can be working for a long period of time. It's high in myoglobin because it's going to want to do oxidative respiration, lots of mitochondria, so lots of oxygen, lots of sugar is stored in the muscles, and it's surrounded by capillaries to make sure we get oxygen constantly supplied to the slow twitch fiber. It's going to rely on aerobic respiration, or oxygen is going to be breaking down that glucose all the time. This occurs in our deep muscles. It's also muscle you're going to be developing if you are looking at swimming, cycling, marathon running, and marathon running being the extreme. Marathon runners, they're small, and most of their muscle is slow twitch fiber. It's muscle that can just keep working. It's full of oxygen. It's full of glucose and glycogen, and it's slow to fatigue. There's also an intermediate form, which is fast twitch fiber with more myoglobin. So it's less susceptible to fatigue, but otherwise it's pretty much the same as fast twitch fiber. In terms of how fast or slow muscles twitch, here is a myogram, and a myogram is just the chart that shows how quickly a muscle twitches. So how fast is a recontraction, and how long does it take for relaxation. If we look at fast twitch muscle, an eye muscle in green, and you're just going to notice that it twitches the quickest. It reaches maximum contraction as fast as possible, and then it relaxes very quickly as well. Once we get to an intermediate muscle, like our calf muscle, longer time to reach the same level of contraction, longer relaxation time, and of course slow twitch muscle, as you'd expect, much more slowly in terms of getting to maximum contraction, and then a much longer time in terms of relaxing Notice the time is measured in milliseconds or millionths of a second, so all three of them are fast in terms of what we think about in daily life. It's just a matter of milliseconds between each in terms of their length. So exercise. Endurance training, of course exercise is good for lots of stuff. Endurance training is going to increase the aerobic efficiency of the muscle. This is going to develop aerobic efficiency or ability to use oxygen. So ability to use the O2 that we take into our body. It increases the period of time muscles can work before lactate fermentation begins. So this is the type of exercise that is going to increase. And there it is right there, so I don't know why I'm writing it down, but increase the number of mitochondria and myoglobin in the muscle fiber. So endurance training is increasing our ability to oxidize the glucose completely. Resistance training is going to increase the size of individual fast twitch fibers. So it's going to increase our ability to take advantage of lactate fermentation. The individual myofibrils thicken and can then split into two myofibrils. So this is how our muscle cells actually get bigger. Basically what we're doing is they get thick, they split, and that's the muscle soreness. And again, I mentioned before, the number of cells don't increase, but the amount of protein inside of our cells do. And this is why if you're bodybuilding, if you're trying to build muscle, you're going to be digesting protein, eating lots of protein, so that our body breaks it down, our digestive system breaks it down into amino acids. Those amino acids travel out to our muscle cells and can then be built into actin strands, myosin strands, troponin strands, tropomyosin strands, troponin, and those proteins that are needed to cause a muscle contraction. All those things are proteins, and as we get more protein inside of a muscle fiber, it has to get bigger to accommodate it. Muscles also maintain homeostasis. They are, the driving force behind our homeostasis. They're what allow homeostasis to happen. One of the easiest ways when we think about extreme temperatures, too hot, too cold, harmful stimuli, too bright, all that kind of stuff. The first way to deal with any of those kinds of stimuli is simply to move away from them. So we move our legs so that we move away from wherever the harmful stimuli is. Or if it's too hot, we might wave our hand in front of our face to cool us off. All that kind of stuff. It also helps reduce heat loss by constricting blood vessels. This is why our limbs get cold first. If you go out in the cold and you're not dressed for it, the first parts of your body to get cold, hands, feet, and nose. And what happens is muscles are constricting capillary beds in those areas because it's more important to keep your heart warm than your hands warm. If you lose a hand from frostbite, it's sad, but if you lose your heart from frostbite, well, then you're dead. So that's the reason our limbs get cold first. And it's caused by muscles. Also, if we're getting cold, we're also going to start shivering. Shivering is basically muscle twitching, and that muscle twitching causes aerobic respiration. As we do aerobic respiration, heat's produced. So this is from aerobic respiration. Or basically, we're breaking down glucose. Mastication of food or chewing, peristalsis, right, moving that bolus. And then the chyme from our stomach. And then there's segmentation in our small intestine. All of these processes are caused by smooth muscle pushing the food through our alimentary canal. So peristalsis is pushing that food. Basically, once it hits our mouth, it goes into our esophagus, it gets pushed down into our stomach, and then pushed through our small intestine and large intestine until it comes out our anus. All of that is peristalsis, controlled by smooth muscle contractions. Homeostasis. Don't want to have too much food in us, otherwise we'll explode. It also controls the oxygen levels in our blood, right? We're moving our diaphragm every time we inhale. The diaphragm contracts, allows oxygen to come into our body, into our blood, and we've talked about the processes that involves, but without muscle, that oxygen can't get into our body, right? Nothing to cause the diaphragm to contract. Heartbeat, of course, is, well, the heart is mostly muscle. Returning the venous blood to our heart. Skeletal muscle. Our veins, blood pressure is low in our veins. So in order for that blood to get back up to our heart, to get oxygen again, there's that system of one-way valves in the veins. As we move our skeletal muscles, it pushes on the veins, pushing the blood up through those one-way valves back towards our heart. The same is true for the movement of lymph. Lymph, again, low pressure inside of lymph vessels, so the way fluid gets moved back up to our heart is by skeletal muscles. They contract, they push up against the lymph vessels, usually squeezing them between a muscle and a bone. As they get squeezed, the fluid pops up through those one-way valves, back up, carrying the fluid back up into our venous system of our blood. Bladder storage. You don't have to think about that too much. Drink a few cups of coffee. You'll be happy that you're able to store stuff in your bladder as opposed to simply leaking it out when you don't want to. So those are all a whole bunch of ways, and there's more, of course, but those are a whole bunch of ways in which muscles help us maintain homeostasis, or that constant internal state of happiness, where we have constant temperature, constant pH in different areas of our body, all that good stuff. So the summary: exercise and the lack of it affects the health of our muscles. Muscle contraction is called a twitch. The muscle fiber is divided into three. There's three types of muscle fiber: fast twitch fiber, slow twitch fiber, and intermediate twitch fiber. Each fiber type has unique qualities, giving it its traits. Exercise can be used to target the type of muscle fiber that we increase. So if you want to increase slow twitch fiber, you're going to be doing aerobic training. If you want to increase fast twitch fiber, you're going to be doing resistance training. And the muscular system is essential in maintaining homeostasis within our other organ systems. It's involved in every single one of our organ systems, usually a smooth muscle, but even our skeletal muscles help maintain homeostasis in our circulatory system and other things. So that is the end of Bio 30 Prep. You'll have three quizzes left, I should say. There's your muscle quiz, then the unit exam, and once you're done those two, the final exam. I hope you enjoyed the course, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask.